In this cyber safety lesson, we will explore secure remote access practices. Our lesson objectives are to understand what secure remote access really means and why it's essential for protecting your data and your network. We'll look at the most common remote access technologies and break down how a secure VPN works. We'll also talk about multi-factor authentication and how it adds a powerful layer of protection beyond just passwords. From there, we'll dive into the threats you should watch out for, like phishing and unsecured devices. Then we'll cover network segmentation, access control best practices, and how to keep endpoints, like laptops and phones, secure while they're outside the office. We'll also explore safe ways to share files and protect data, especially when people are collaborating from different locations. And finally, we'll touch on some important legal and regulatory considerations, because staying compliant is just as critical as staying secure. Before starting this lesson, let's pause for just a second to give you time to think about how much you already know about secure remote access practices. Remember, there's no wrong answer here. So why is secure remote access such a big deal? These days, working from anywhere is the norm, whether it's from home, a local coffee shop, or even across the globe. That kind of flexibility is great for productivity, but it also opens the door to cyber threats if connections aren't properly secured. Now, imagine a globe with a shield over it. That's the perfect symbol for what we're trying to achieve. People need to connect from anywhere, but we've got to protect that access like a fortress. Without security in place, you're essentially giving hackers an open invite to your network. Unsecured access points can lead to stolen data, system breaches, or even full-scale ransomware attacks. And beyond the technical risk, there are compliance issues too. A single misstep in how remote access is handled could violate data protection laws like HIPAA, FERPA, or others, depending on your industry. But here's the good news. When remote access is done right, with tools like VPNs, multi-factor authentication, and endpoint security, teams can work efficiently and safely. You're enabling productivity while keeping your data locked down. Secure remote access isn't just about technology. It's about trust, responsibility, and protecting your organization no matter where your team logs in from. Before we dive into the tools, let's make sure we're clear on what remote access actually means. Remote access is the ability to connect to a company's network, system, or data from outside the physical office, whether you're working from home, traveling, or on the road. It's what lets employees access shared drives, use internal apps, or even troubleshoot a server from miles away. It's become essential not just for remote work, but also for IT support teams and businesses with mobile or international staff. Let's break down the four most common types of remote access technologies. First up, VPNs, or virtual private networks. These create a secure tunnel between your device and the company's network. It's one of the most popular and secure ways to connect when working remotely. Next is Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. This lets you actually log into your desktop computer at the office from another device, so it feels like you're sitting right there even if you're not. Then we have Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, or VDI. This one's a little more advanced. It runs a desktop environment on a centralized server or in the cloud. It's great for security and consistency because all the data stays on the server, not your personal device. And finally, there are cloud access tools. These are web-based platforms like Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 that let you access files, email, and collaboration tools from anywhere. No VPN or server connection is needed. Each of these tools has its strengths, and organizations often use a mix depending on their needs. How do you go about setting up a secure VPN connection the right way? Step 1 is choosing a trustworthy VPN provider or enterprise-grade solution. You want something that's reliable, has good security features, and is built for business use. Next, make sure it uses strong encryption protocols like AES 256-bit encryption. That's what creates that secure tunnel between your device and the company network, keeping data safe from prying eyes. Then comes authentication. Don't rely on just a username and password. Use multi-factor authentication or MFA to add an extra layer of protection. You also want to follow the principle of least privilege. That means users should only have access to the systems and data they absolutely need, not the entire network. And finally, keep everything up to date. That includes the VPN software itself, but also the devices connecting to it. Security patches are crucial for blocking known vulnerabilities. If you want a quick reference, here's a best practices checklist. First, use a business-grade VPN. Avoid free or consumer-grade services. Always turn on multi-factor authentication and monitor and log VPN activity to detect suspicious behavior. Make sure you apply patches to keep the system secure. And finally, control access. Only approved users and devices should be allowed to connect. These practices help keep your VPN setup safe, even as your team works from different locations. When it comes to securing remote access, multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is a game changer. MFA works by requiring 2 or more ways to prove your identity. Usually, that means something you know, like a password, and something you have, like a code from your phone or an authentication app. Sometimes it might even include something you are, like a fingerprint. Why does this matter? Because passwords alone are easy targets. If someone gets hold of your login information, MFA acts as a second lock on the door, making it much harder for attackers to get in. MFA is especially important when accessing sensitive systems remotely, like VPNs or cloud platforms, and it's often a requirement for compliance with security regulations like HIPAA or PCI DSS. 2 common ways to get one-time codes for two-factor authentication are authenticator apps and codes via SMS or email. Authenticator apps like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator give you a stronger layer of security. They work even when you're offline, and once you've got it set up, they're pretty easy to use and work with most accounts. The best part is that they're free and widely supported. But there's a catch. You do need to go through a setup process, and if your phone gets lost or wiped, you could lose access unless you've backed it up or saved recovery codes. Now, SMS and email codes are the go-to for convenience. There's nothing to install and they're super easy to use. Almost every service supports them. However, these are not the most secure. Hackers can intercept text through SIM swapping or phishing. Plus, they rely on you having access to your network or email, which can sometimes cause delays or failures in getting the code. It's really a trade-off, convenience versus stronger security. Now let's break down 2 more popular authentication options: hardware tokens and biometrics. First up, hardware tokens. Hardware tokens are physical devices like YubiKeys that you plug in or tap to authenticate. These offer top-tier security because they're not connected to the internet and don't rely on apps or your phone. They work with tons of platforms and are totally separate from your personal devices. But what are the downsides? You have to physically carry the hardware token with you, and that means it can get lost, damaged, or just forgotten. Plus, there's a cost involved, especially if you're trying to roll them out to a whole team or a company. What about biometrics? Biometrics are things like fingerprint scans, face recognition, or even iris scans. They're incredibly convenient. You don't have to remember anything or carry anything around with you. And since your fingerprint or face is unique to you, it's hard to steal or fake. Most modern devices have this built in, so it feels seamless. However, not every device supports biometrics. There are also privacy and legal concerns, and while rare, there are some spoofing methods out there. And here's the tricky part. If your biometric data ever gets compromised, you can't exactly change your fingerprint like you would a password. So both of these options bring strong security, but with different trade-offs between convenience, cost, and control. Multi-factor authentication is a powerful security tool, but it's not bulletproof. Cisco's Talos team found that MFA was a factor in nearly half of all the incidents they investigated in early 2024. In about a quarter of those cases, attackers used prompt bombing, flooding users with fake push notifications, hoping they'd approve one out of habit or confusion. And in 20% of the incidents they investigated, MFA wasn't configured properly or it was missing altogether. These gaps contributed to major breaches, including ransomware attacks in healthcare and the Snowflake customer compromises, where MFA wasn't enabled by default. The takeaway: not all MFA is created equal. Basic SMS codes are better than nothing, but they're still vulnerable. Security experts recommend using phishing-resistant methods like hardware tokens or app-based authenticators, and making sure MFA is always configured correctly. When it comes to remote access, convenience brings risk. Let's switch gears and look at the biggest threats that security teams deal with. First up, stolen or weak credentials. If someone gets a hold of your login and password, or if you use something like password 123, you're giving attackers the keys to the kingdom. Then there's phishing, where fake emails or texts trick users into clicking a link or entering their credentials on a fake login page. It's one of the most common ways hackers gain access. Public Wi-Fi is another big risk. Those coffee shop networks might be convenient, but they're often wide open and easy for attackers to snoop on. And what if you lose your phone or laptop? A lost or stolen device can give someone direct access to work systems, especially if it's not protected with strong security. Finally, outdated software is a silent threat. Skipping security updates means leaving known vulnerabilities wide open for exploit. We'll go a little deeper into a few of these next. One of the biggest threats is phishing, resulting in credential theft. Phishing emails or texts often look like they're from your company, your bank, or even your boss. They ask you to click a link, verify your information, or reset a password. But instead of going to a legitimate site, that link leads to a fake login page designed to steal your credentials. Another attack, called credential stuffing, uses usernames and passwords from previous data breaches to break into other accounts. This is why using the same password across sites is so risky. The best defense is to always verify before clicking and use multi-factor authentication. It won't stop every attack, but it adds an important layer of protection if your credentials are stolen. What about risk from devices and networks? Unsecured devices are a major risk, especially when people don't use screen locks, encryption, or device-level security. If a laptop gets left on a plane or a phone is stolen, someone could access sensitive company data. Outdated systems can also leave the door wide open. Hackers love targeting older software with known flaws. Then there's the issue of public Wi-Fi. If you're not using a VPN, everything you send, logins, emails, files, can be intercepted by someone on the same network. Finally, make sure devices are set up with remote tracking or wipe features. If something is lost, you should be able to lock it down or erase the data. With remote access, not everyone needs access to everything. That's where network segmentation and access control come in. Think of it like rooms in a building. You don't give the junior accountant a key to the CEO's office, right? The same logic applies in cybersecurity. By segmenting your network, you can isolate sensitive data, applications, or even devices, like keeping your finance systems separate from employee laptops or IoT devices. That way, if something gets compromised, it can't spread everywhere. VLANs and firewalls are great tools to help with this, allowing you to define and control what traffic goes where. Then there's access control. The best practice is to follow the principle of least privilege. That means giving people access only to the systems and data they need to do their job, and nothing else. Using role-based access control makes it easier to manage this across teams. And don't forget, permissions should be reviewed regularly. Access needs change, and outdated privileges can lead to security gaps. When you combine smart segmentation with tight access control, you dramatically reduce the risk of breaches and data exposure. When we talk about endpoint security, We're talking about protecting the devices that connect remotely, like laptops, smartphones, or tablets. These are called endpoints, and in a remote work setup, they're just as important to secure as the servers and the network itself. After all, if a hacker gets into a laptop, they might as well be sitting inside your office. So, how do you keep endpoints secure? You should start with the basics: antivirus software, firewalls, and disk encryption. These are your first lines of defense. Then make sure every device is kept up to date with the latest patches and software updates, because outdated systems are a hacker's dream. You should also enable features like remote tracking, lock, and wipe. That way, if a device is lost or stolen, you can protect the data even if the hardware is gone. And finally, don't forget the human factor. User education is a huge part of endpoint security. Teaching people how to spot phishing and avoid risky downloads and to report suspicious activity can make a big difference. Security should be your first priority when sharing files remotely. We're talking about more than just convenience. It's about protecting sensitive information from being seen or stolen by the wrong people. First, always use secure encrypted platforms like OneDrive, Google Drive, or Dropbox for business. These services offer features like access control, activity logs, and encryption in transit and at rest. And here's a big one: avoid sending sensitive documents as email attachments. Instead, share a secure link that expires after a set time or once it's been used. That way, even if the link gets forwarded, it can't be reused forever. Also, take advantage of access control settings. You can make a file view only, block downloads, or limit access to specific people or groups. And as we've mentioned many times, don't forget to enable multi-factor authentication on whatever platform you're using. This will add another layer of protection against unauthorized access. Beyond file sharing, we also need to look at how we protect data overall, whether it's being stored, sent, or backed up. Start with encryption. That means making data unreadable to anyone who doesn't have the right key. Always encrypt files, both when they're stored on a device and when they're being sent across the internet. Then there's data loss prevention, or DLP. These tools help spot when sensitive data is being mishandled, like if someone tries to email confidential files to a personal address. Data classification is another great tool. By labeling data as public, internal, or confidential, you can apply the right protection level to each type of file. And of course, don't forget automatic backups and secure storage. If something is lost, damaged, or stolen, a secure backup can save the day. Lastly, make sure everyone on the team knows how to spot and handle sensitive information properly. Training goes a long way toward preventing accidental leaks. When employees work remotely, your organization's responsibilities don't disappear. Data protection laws and industry regulations still apply, no matter where the work is being done. Whether you're in finance, healthcare, education, or any other field, you have to make sure remote access doesn't lead to data privacy disasters. Ignoring these requirements could mean fines, lawsuits, or a hit to your company's reputation. The good news? Following the law often overlaps with following smart security practices, things like encryption, access control, and secure storage. In other words, compliance is about being both secure and accountable. Let's break down a few of the most important laws tied to remote access. Starting with HIPAA. HIPAA is all about protecting health information. If employees access patient records remotely, those connections must be encrypted, logged, and controlled. PCI DSS is a must for anyone handling credit card data. It requires strict authentication and restricted access to payment systems. No exceptions are made for remote workers. And FERPA. FERPA applies to schools and educational software. If student data is accessed remotely, it must be protected just like it would be inside a school's network. Each of these regulations has different details, but the big idea is the same. Remote work doesn't eliminate your legal responsibilities. So how do you make sure you're staying compliant? Start by using secure connections. The technical safeguards we've talked about, like VPNs and multi-factor authentication, help protect sensitive data. Next, train your team. Employees need to understand how to handle personal information, especially when working remotely. Make sure you log and monitor remote access to detect suspicious activity early. And lastly, stay up to date. Legal requirements evolve, especially in fields like healthcare and education. Review your policies regularly to make sure that you're not falling behind. One major challenge with remote access today isn't just technology, it's compliance with a growing wave of state level data privacy laws. Since there's no single federal privacy law in the United States, individual states are stepping up. As of July 2024, new privacy regulations have gone live in states like Florida, Texas, Oregon, and Montana, joining California and several other states. These laws give consumers more control over their personal data, and they require businesses to step up their security game. That means stronger encryption, access controls, and logging for any remote access to sensitive information. And this trend isn't slowing down. By mid 2024, over a dozen states had passed their own privacy laws, and more are on the way. So, what does that mean for organizations? You need to make sure your remote access practices aren't just secure. They must be legally compliant in every state you operate. That includes updating policies, configuring systems properly, and training your team on what data can be accessed and how. Now that you've reached the end of the lesson, let's pause again to give you time to think about how much you now know about secure remote access practices. Congratulations, you have now completed this cyber safety lesson brought to you by the Nighthawk Cyber Alliance.